Hello, citizen or citizens of the world. Welcome to the European Show. It's your new one-stop shop for transcontinental politics, society, and the occasional scandal or scandals. I'm Abby Bella. It's 100 seconds to midnight on the Doomsday Clock, and this is my outsider view of what happened in Europe this week. Let's take a look. And this week in Europe, we have a lot of kind of strange developments. I want to say it's out of the ordinary, but no longer. Oh, no longer. We have a war with France that the United Kingdom has embarked upon, apparently. We're also looking at the election of the century, in a way, a super election, as Politico is calling it, in the United Kingdom. And that's happening as we speak. And we're looking at some interesting responses from Germany and the European Union regarding the patent waiver on the COVID vaccines. And it's not necessarily in a good way. And we're going to start off with the election in the United Kingdom because it seems like the least kind of out there, I guess, out of all the stories. The election that happened yesterday in the United Kingdom was a kind of super election because a lot of the things that were supposed to happen in 2020 didn't because of COVID-19, and they were kind of pushed forward to 2021. So we're looking at local and regional elections with over 5,000 seats up for grabs, and a lot of things kind of happening all at the same time. We have the Labour Party, which is meant to be, I guess, like some kind of an opposition to conservatives in the United Kingdom, but has kind of not done that job at all, really, for a good long time. I'd say since the Tony Blair years, but people have different opinions on it. So we have the Labour Party and its leader, Sir Keir Starmer, who is kind of dependent on the results of this election. We have Nicola Sturgeon, who is the leader of the Scottish National Party in Scotland, who is looking at a strong majority in Parliament through this election. And if she can get that and she can remain First Minister, she will be pushing through a second referendum on independence in Scotland and will probably be successful. This means a lot of changes for Scotland and the United Kingdom. So that's happening as we speak. They're counting the votes right now on all these elections. The parliamentary in Scotland, we're looking at elections in the United Kingdom as well. We're looking at different constituencies. And we're also looking at London, where the people of London are right now, have already, but we're counting the votes. The people of London are going to choose their next mayor, and that's always a load of fun, because a lot of different people stand for mayor, and it's a bit of a Monty Python-esque affair, the elections for mayor. But first, I just want to do a quick overview of what's happening with Keir Starmer. So we have this super election. We have over 5,000 seats within the UK that are kind of up for election. We'll probably have the results tomorrow. Everything's taking a little bit longer to count because of COVID regulations as well. But Keir Starmer, Sir Keir Starmer is the current leader of Labour. And I have obviously a lot of problems with Starmer. If you're not that into kind of intra Labour politics, maybe you're watching from, I don't know, France for one, and if you are, I apologize for the war. But yeah, so Labour kind of ousted Corbyn. He was an uncomfortable, truly leftist candidate. We now have Starmer in charge of Labour. As the name suggests, it's meant to be the party of the working people who do labor. And the kind of new liberal, pro-capitalist, anti-labor, anti-working class mentality within Labour is so strong that Labour decided, once they got rid of Corbyn, they decided, you know what, let's have Sir Keir Starmer in charge of this. This is exactly the kind of candidate we need. This is exactly the kind of guy we need to run the working people's party. A knight of the realm in this outdated anachronistic, ridiculous system that is the United Kingdom political sphere, knighted by the Queen. This man, a knight of the Queen, right, who is sworn in allegiance to the Queen, the actual Queen of England, is leading the Labour Party. It really is a little bit like putting a fox in charge of the chickens, isn't it? But, you know, this is the state of British Labour today, and has been for a very, very long time. So, what we already know about this situation with Keir Starmer is that up to this election, Keir Starmer he's not very popular. People are not taking to him. He's not getting a lot of kind of popular feeling. He's not appealing to the people properly, and he's definitely not appealing to the kind of left, the actual left in the Labour Party, and he's not appealing to other left voters, and certainly not to the Corbynite faction. He's kind of failed at everything he's was supposed to be doing. He's not offering any kind of opposition to the current government. He's just not really doing anything. And there's this very big constituency in the United Kingdom. It's big in terms of its significance because the United Kingdom is a small place. But Hartlepool is in question. It's a constituency that has traditionally, since the 1970s, been a Labour constituency. People always vote Labour there. It's a Labour through and through place. Keir Starmer has been kind of intimating that, you know, he understands, I think there's he felt the pressure before this election, feeling that he's probably going to lose a lot of people because of his image, and people are probably not going to vote Labour. So Starmer already made some announcements saying, you know, he's going to take it on board. He's going to take responsibility for this election, whatever happens. And he also intimated that, you know, if he loses Hartlepool, Labour loses, but he is the leader of Labour. Starmer intimated that if he loses Hartlepool, he might resign. He might have to take that as a message to, you know, just give up. And I think he should. I'm obviously not from the United Kingdom. I'm not British, or don't identify as British, and I'm not really a member of the Labour Party. I probably wouldn't want to be a member of the Labour Party. I don't really have a Labour dog in this race in that sense. But I do have a leftist dog in this race, and I think it's appalling that someone like Keir Starmer, who is a former prosecutor, who is a Knight of the Realm, the fact that he is in charge of Labour is appalling. And it's especially appalling because of the context of United Kingdom politics and the kind of class society that kind of persists in the United Kingdom, especially in England. The working people know about it, they know it, it's a known thing. People do, there's so much class identity here, and there's so much social inequality. And time again, over the past decades, Labour has let down the people of the United Kingdom, and it has let down the working class, people who are less advantaged, people who don't have access to the kinds of services that, you know, someone who might be a Knight of the Realm would have. And it's exactly the same kind of people also who are meant to be helped. You know, the people of Labour are the kind of working class, disadvantaged working class that is very much fallen prey to the horrible austerity measures put into place by the former Conservative government, but also before then, the new Labour policies of Tony Blair. They've been really let down by Labour in general. And now, the fact that it's someone who used to be a prosecutor who would have been prosecuting a lot of these people, because that's just how new liberal societies work. A lot of people in England who don't have a lot of money end up having problems with the law simply because they're poor, and they don't have the kind of representation in court that they deserve, and Keir Starmer would have been the guy prosecuting them. I mean, this is the state of the Working People's Party in the United Kingdom today. I don't think it's ever been this bad. At least Tony Blair put on this facade. Like, he put on that mask. He was like, we're going to change Britain. We're going to modernize. It's going to be different. It's going to be amazing. We're going to love each other. Sir Keir Starmer is like, he is the enemy. He is the enemy within. And he symbolizes all the things that are wrong with British society, at least in my opinion. And just to be clear, I, in terms of my leftism, this is like a personal story, why I feel so strongly and why I want to talk about the state of the United Kingdom left today is because I originally got radicalized in this country precisely because of the kinds of inequalities that happen here, because I experienced it firsthand and I saw it. And I got my university education here. And there was a very strong, incredibly strong, like solid left at the university that I went to. And I have to say, like, I struggle to think of many other places in the world, certainly not in Europe or the European Union, where there is so much inequality and it's so ingrained in the system. And just the idea of this guy being in charge is just so offensive, and I know it's very incredibly offensive to a lot of British people. So there you go. That's the Labour situation. I'm not trying to hate on Starmer, because I'm not trying to be holier than thou left and kind of like saying you can't reform Labour. You can reform Labour. You can reform Labour by putting Corbyn back where he belongs, which is in charge of Labour. Because Jeremy Corbyn isn't particularly radical. He's a kind of he's an old school lefty with not particularly radical ideas. A lot of them outdated, and they have a lot of problems with Corbyn too, but I think Starmer is just, it's an eyesore. It's an insult to the working people of the United Kingdom. So there you go. I think we'll see what happens. We already have the Hartlepool, because the Hartlepool kind of results are in. We already have like some commentary from Starmer and from Corbyn on this. I haven't been able to look at it because it's kind of happening in real time. But I have a feeling if I make any prediction on this situation, I would say Starmer will not stand down. He kind of said he might, but I don't think he will. I think it's going to be like another kind of power play. I'm not sure who else they might have that would like appease all the people in Labour. But it would be, this is just testament to the fact that things need to change radically, and kind of centrism and neoliberal centrism in left or historically left parties around the world, like certainly like in the Western kind of context, this is not working anymore, and no one's interested in that. And it's a tragedy, because the government that's in power right now and its leader, Boris Johnson, this is probably the most corrupt government that Britain has maybe even ever had. It's the most aggressive and anti-people and destructive government that this country probably has ever had. I don't know. I struggle to think of a time when things were worse than this, and I'm including Margaret Thatcher in this. Margaret Thatcher was evil but not corrupt, whereas Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom right now, he is both evil and corrupt, and indeed styling himself on Margaret Thatcher, which is insane. So the other thing that's going to happen is London is going to pick its mayor. Currently, the mayor of London is Sadiq Khan. He is a Labour guy, again. So in theory, in theory, he's not supposed to be conservative. In theory, he's on the left. He is not at all any of those things. He's a centrist neoliberal, which might as well be a conservative. He is one of those interesting kind of false identity politic kind of promise people. He is the first Muslim mayor of London. So And that's nice. Representation is really important, I think, especially when it comes to diversity and the representation of different, like, not just religions, but just, different people. In the United Kingdom, there's never been enough representation. And Sadiq Khan kind of fulfills that role, which is nice. He's a very personable kind of politician. He's like a nice guy. But at the same time, he is a neoliberal hack and hasn't done a lot for London in terms of actually helping the people of London in a pandemic. Or at least he hasn't really done anything particularly spectacular. He is running against some interesting candidates. There's a conservative candidate that that is like a realistic alternative to Sadiq Khan. They seem to be going head to head, but I think Sadiq Khan will win because people already know him. They're used to him. He's like, the guy next door. Like, he's like, you see like tweets of him doing, kind of fasting, and then like, like doing pictures in the restaurant, like in a nice restaurant for a Ramadan. Like, it's very relatable, and he seems to be like a very kind of homely kind of person. So I think he's probably going to win this one. If he doesn't, we also have other candidates. The great thing about the United Kingdom is that before it was a thing, the United Kingdom had this like big tradition of joke candidates. And there's like a whole joke party. It was founded in 1982. It's called the Monster Raving Loony Party, I believe. It's like a whole thing. And they stand in every election. They're kind of out there. They're always like doing their thing. It's a big tradition. They usually get something like 1% support. But, you never know. So the Monster Raving Loony Party is a thing. It's part of this tradition. They're not standing in the election for mayor, but we have individual independent candidates who are fulfilling this promise and this tradition. We have Count Binface. Count Binface is a charming candidate. If you're listening to this rather than watching, he has like a whole PR thing. I didn't realize this, but apparently he's been around for a long time. He goes back to the Theresa May government, and I think before even too. He's this guy who walks around with kind of dressed like a knight, but like instead of like knightly armor, he's got like an actual bin on his head, and he's calling himself a count, and he is just, charming. He does have some interesting policies that I can actually stand with, that I support. For example, his manifesto says that he would like to put a cap on the price of croissants. He says no shop should be allowed to sell a croissant for more than £1. And I second this. I think that's true. I don't think it should. I'm with this. He's got some other interesting proposals. One that is kind of obvious is London to join the European Union. Again, why not? We also have, I'm trying to find like there's like a whole, like he's got like 24 points to his manifesto, which is like way more clear than a lot of other candidates. But I'm trying to find ones that are a little bit more universally relatable. Traitors' Gate to be reopened for business, which I think is in the Tower of London, or near the Tower of London. And the royal family to keep one of Buckingham Palace, Kensington Palace, St. James Palace, and Clarence House, with the rest gifted to the nation to help eradicate homelessness. So Count Binface has some interesting progressive policies. He does wear a bin on his head. He's got this like beautiful cape as well. Unfortunately, he's probably not going to be in charge of London when the vote is counted, but I kind of, part of me wishes he would be. So there's Count Binface. Who else is interesting in this running? There's other candidates who are joke candidates, but unintentionally we have Piers Corbin. Piers Corbin is actually Jeremy Corbyn's brother. But he's like that brother that like everyone's embarrassed by. He's a kind of former scientist, gone conspiracy theorist. He's a COVID denier. I think he's a climate change denier. I can't remember now. So just an all-round conspiracy theorist. But I have no hate for him. He has his own thing going on. Britain is all about that eccentric kind of, individualism. So, but I think it's just a little bit funny how these, we're all connected in this weird way, and it's just a weird story about the Corbyn clan. And it doesn't take away from Jeremy Corbyn. It doesn't take away from what he stands for, and it doesn't take away from his integrity at all. But yeah, this is the level we're at in Britain right now. Well. Actually, let me interrupt myself there for a second. I just saw something on the Corbyn versus Starmer situation. Corbyn just got asked in an interview on the Hartlepool loss whether he agrees that the theory out there is that Labour is losing everywhere in the United Kingdom because of Corbyn. Like, this is insane. The mainstream media are trying to blame Corbyn for Keir Starmer's loss in Hartlepool this time around. This is like the constant kind of like the constant narrative. And actually the interviewer said to him, do you think it's because of your legacy and the legacy of Tony Blair and that like you and Blair wrecked Labour? Like, you could not think of two more opposite leaders. One has nothing to do with the other. Blair left British politics in like 2007. What I can't, like, the hatred for Corbyn is so strong and so over the top. Like, they will blame her for whatever happens in and outside of Labour. No, this is clearly the fact that Labour is doing so badly is clearly an indication that maybe it's time to get Corbyn back on track and back in the driving seat. Because the alternatives that are being offered to Corbyn are so poor that even Hartlepool didn't vote the correct way, quote unquote. Sorry, I just had to like weave that in because I just find it appalling. I find it so appalling that they always do this. It's like Corbyn is like they want to make it about Corbyn, like this clear lack of connection with the actual real people of the United Kingdom. Now it's like Corbyn's fault again. It's not. It's a sign that Corbyn was probably a better person for the job. Just to be clear, this was a Channel 4 News interview that Corbyn gave, and the questions are ridiculous. It's just so like tragically kind of like on it. Like, the Corbyn bashing is incredible, and they never bash him for the right stuff because he's not a saint. And I'm not a JC follower or anything like that, or a Corbynista, but I think Corbyn is the only way. There's really no alternative. Okay, so there's that drama with Labour. And the other drama, which is a better drama. This is like the nice part of that Shakespearean play that is British politics and United Kingdom politics today. So the good side of it is the Scottish situation. The Scottish situation very much influenced by the leader of Scotland, the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, who is... for me, I love Nicola Sturgeon. I do not love or like many politicians. She doesn't stand for everything that I believe in. There's a lot of things that she believes in that I find kind of appalling. She's way more of a centrist, socializing Democrat, but not really a social democrat. I wouldn't say that. But she's kind of on the right side of history with a lot of things. And I love the determination with which she has led Scotland and has led Scotland in opposition to the power structures in Westminster, which is where all the evil conservatives live and where they exert power, where they do a lot of corrupt insider politics. Nicola Sturgeon is like, she's so energetic and so clear on what she wants for Scotland, the vision for Scotland, the kind of dignity with which she puts forth the case for Scotland is amazing. And full disclosure on Sturgeon, she has always been clear that her designs on Scotland are independence. She's always been for independence. She is one of those people, she's so determined to make Scotland free, she will do it. She will do it. And every time she, does a critique of the establishment in the United Kingdom, of Westminster establishment, I love that fighting spirit in her, and it just makes me smile a little bit that she's like someone who's really standing up to the establishment in this way. This is not to say that she's some kind of like an amazing outsider, but she's got like the makings of that for sure. And Scotland is an interesting place and an interesting situation. So what's happening with this election in Scotland is the people have voted. We're counting the votes for the parliamentary elections in Scotland, and this will decide whether Nicola Sturgeon will remain First Minister, which she for sure will. So we know that much. And it looks like she's going to have a majority government. And when that happens, unconfirmed, but definitely going to happen, because there's a lot of support for the Scottish National Party. She'll be in a position as the leader of Scotland, the head of the SNP, the Scottish National Party. She will be in a position to carry out her intention of having a second referendum for leaving the United Kingdom in Scotland. And there's a whole kind of story behind that. Scotland had a referendum in 2014. And it was about leaving the United Kingdom, about going independent. Scotland and England and the United Kingdom as a whole, that's been like a toxic relationship for the hundreds of years. It's the usual imperialism, raping and pillaging, things like that. England's been invading Scotland for a long time. And obviously there's a very different story and a very different historical narrative to these two places. And Scottish people are very proud of their heritage. They feel very separate to England, and they have like a profound dislike of Englishness in terms of its domination of the culture in the United Kingdom. This is a personal story caveat here. For me is I lived in Scotland for 12 months in 2019, and I found Scotland to be a really amazing place, actually. Scotland is one of those places where you just go and like everyone's incredibly friendly. It doesn't feel like you're in the United Kingdom because of just how friendly people are. They have a certain specific outlook on things. There's just more of like an acceptance of social democratic values there than there is in England. England's always been very kind of entrenched in Toryism and conservatism and neoliberalism, really, since Margaret Thatcher. So Scotland's very different. The people that, when you talk to people, I'd say like 80% to 85% of everyone that I ever spoke to in Scotland was like, F England, we're leaving. Very pro-European Union, incredibly bitter and pissed off that because of the United Kingdom, they were edged out of the European Union. Scotland, in the Brexit referendum in 2016, voted predominantly to stay. So as far as Scotland is concerned, they did not vote to leave the European Union, but England and the rest of the UK did. So it's a bit of a situation. When the first Brexit referendum happened, it was 2014. There wasn't the will to leave the UK. It just seemed like too much of a hassle. The United Kingdom was a member of the European Union at the time, and it didn't seem as though anyone would do anything so insane as to leave the European Union. It's like, because it's such a strong status quo, right? And no one who voted in the Scottish referendum in 2014 could have foreseen that the majority of the United Kingdom would vote the way it did. No one foresaw this, including the Brexit Party people. No one, it was always like a bluff, like a protest thing. Nobody thought it would happen, but then, we saw in 2016 a lot of things happened that nobody was expecting, including the Spanish Inquisition. So the people of Scotland feel very strongly that they want to have a second referendum. Nicola Sturgeon kind of felt that out, even though she herself has always been about having these, having the possibility, giving people the possibility to be independent. It's not just like her vision. This is the vision of the Scottish people. It seems to be the consensus that they at least want to be asked the question in the context of post-Brexit United Kingdom. And Nicola Sturgeon has made it clear that if she is First Minister again, and if there's enough of a majority, she will be going forward with a proposal she put forth before on a second Brexit referendum, which will take place by 2023. And that's going to happen. It looks like it's going to happen. So far, through what we know by the vote count so far, she's going to be the First Minister again. No surprises there. And she will push through the second Brexit referendum. I trust Nicola Sturgeon to do it. And it's sadly, it's a difficult thing because I know it's going to negatively impact British people as a whole, people in the United Kingdom, English people. But it's going to be an amazing choice for Scotland, and they really need to do it. A lot of Scotland feels very positively about the European Union. They don't want to be separated from the rest of the European and global community, the way that, this vision has been kind of carried out in the United Kingdom. There's this constant, ongoing psychological battle over oil that was discovered along the coast of Scotland in the 1970s, and was kind of, it's like a whole thing, but there was like a whole operation in England that was run by the government to mystify the Scottish people and to research the oil situation. And the Scottish people were misinformed about the amount of oil there was, and indeed the kind of wealth that they could possibly have if they could exploit it themselves. Westminster in England stole from the Scottish people and lied to their face. And we know this because some of these reports have been made public through the Freedom of Information Act since the 1970s. There is no love lost there. This is like a long history of insider dealing, corruption, things kind of being taken away from the Scottish people. And right now, Scotland has no prospects for thriving in this kind of isolated little island. They will do really well in the European Union. And in fact, these old reports that were made in the 1970s where when England got a little bit scared that Scotland would thrive, did kind of say that, if Scotland pursues all the resources it has, it's going to be a second Norway. We're looking at a population of just over 5 million people, just like Norway, with a bunch of oil and a bunch of other resources. And the reports were like really kind of fearful that the people of Scotland would realize that they have this power and they will become independent and will become a tiny but very firm and strong power on the European map. But that was prevented by bad actors acting behind the scenes, very undemocratic, very corrupt. It's kind of like a story from the kinds of, it's like one of those like fantastical stories about a third world government somewhere out there, duping its people and lying to its people and stealing from the people. But that's what Westminster does, unfortunately. So power to the Scottish people. I hope they can get away from any kind of exploitation they're experiencing right now, and they will thrive in the European Union. They will get they will contribute so much to the European Union, and they will receive a lot from the European Union. And a lot of Scottish people, the ones I know for sure, always say that they feel European first, and a part of the UK second. So it seems like a no-brainer. It may even be that the Scottish referendum will happen before 2023. This is just like a deadline for now. And even Boris Johnson asked about it recently. Like someone asked him, what are you going to do when they have a referendum and they vote to leave? He was like, well, we just have to wait and see. He was very kind of firmly against it some time ago, but now I think it's becoming clear that Scotland will have its way. And, I mean, you can't blame him. So that's Scotland. And speaking of old feuds and bizarre European histories and animosity back from the Middle Ages and the raping and pillaging, there's been some developments in terms of England, or, the United Kingdom, but it's mainly England, and France. Indeed, it seems that since I last saw you, or heard you, or you heard me if you're listening, it seems that Britain has gone to war with France. That's right. There's like navy being deployed to pacify the French on the border seas. This is what's happening. This is all to do with Brexit. This is all. I mean, it writes itself. The comedy writes itself. Monty Python forever. So there's this like whole weird feud going around between United Kingdom and the European Union and different countries within the European Union, and it's to do with fishing. While everyone was kind of part of the Union, everyone was fishing in each other's waters and, kind of cooperating and collaborating peacefully in the Union. And since that stopped, there's been some lack of clarity as to who can go where, who can fish where. It's not like, set in stone. A lot of these new regulations are just coming in, so people are kind of doing it as they go along, kind of making it up. And the United Kingdom took umbrage at the fact that French fisher people and fishing vessels were kind of going into regions of the United Kingdom where they're not supposed to be fishing and where they need a permit to fish. And a lot of these people from France who were doing the fishing weren't kind of clear. It hadn't been communicated properly that they needed the permit, and because it's all so new, it was a total mess. So we ended up with all these French people doing the fishing on the wrong side of the sea, and the British side getting really effed off, and there was like a kind of standoff on that, and then the French got really, really pissed. And because we're all so connected and everything's so close to each other, and it used to be such like a strong and unanimous collaboration in the European Union, there's like anomalies to this. So there's this island, the island of Jersey in the United Kingdom is one of those kind of boring middle class islands. A lot of rich people go there to live. Jersey's kind of posh. It's tiny. But the thing about Jersey is that it gets a lot of its electricity from France because it's so close. So the island of Jersey became this like pawn in this war game between France and England and fishing and fisheries. And France threatened to cut off the electricity supply on Jersey Island if the British would not like tone down with the whole permits on fishing, and if if communication was not improved, the people of Jersey would lose their electricity. This is like literal reversing of the Enlightenment here. We're watching this in real time. We're actually going back to the Middle Ages, but this is not the end of the story, because then when the French threatened this, the UK got really, really angry, and they sent their navy to meet these fisher people. They sent a warship to block the fishing. And that is the war with France. We're having like a navy standoff. The warships have since retrieved and bloodshed has been avoided this time around. But it just goes to show you how constantly close Europe is to its heritage and its history, and it's all just like full of these ridiculous ironies. Because of course France and England have been warring forever, since like the beginning of Europe. Since people could speak Latin in these lands, they've been at war. They've been killing each other, invading each other. What can I say? It's been like war after war after war. And incredibly ironically, we kind of had the anniversary of the death of Napoleon on the 5th of May, which is like kind of when this whole thing was going down. So it's just like, it's a delicious story, and it's so stupid, and it just kind of unmasks this, like, the whole futility of something like Brexit, where you're so connected to everyone else. We are, like, whether you're the kind of person who's like an anti-globalist left person or progressive, or whether you're pro a kind of universal kind of leftism, one thing is true: you can't reverse the kinds of connections we already have. And when you try to, this is what happens. Like, it took a week, and Britain was like at war with France. If someone had said that this would happen, like that the Navy would be deployed to like bully French people 5 years ago, 10 years ago, like it's surreal. It's just surreal. But this is, again, like, this is the level of politics we have attained. This is the rock bottom, the bottom of the sea. And it kind of almost makes me think, like, I mean, you know, the joke is that, you know, like, did Brexit happen just because England secretly wanted to go to war with France? Was that the intention? We just wanted to go to war with France, but it was awkward because we were like allies before as part of the European Union. So the Conservative government went through this entire like pro-Brexit thing and they just orchestrated that so they could invade France and kill the French. It's preposterous. And I guess, like, and again, like, I'm not a fan of Macron, but he's been having like a lot of weird stuff happening to him. I don't envy his political situation right now. He had like a mini coup with the generals who were like threatening chaos because of all the, you know, evil non-white, non-Christian people in France, and so he had to deal with that, and then he had to deal with the Second Napoleonic War of 2021. Oh, Europe. There's history everywhere. And now we come to some mixed news. It's a bit of good news, I guess, and some bad news too, although it's all probably bad news anyway. This is the patent waiver issue on COVID-19 vaccines. We've had this global move and discussion about how, you know, in a global pandemic, when people are dying, especially in light of the situation that's happening in India, wouldn't it be great to kind of not think about profits for 5 seconds and waiver the patent on the COVID-19 vaccine? There was some pushback from it, but generally what happened is in the European Union context, Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, has expressed that she thinks it's a good idea. There's going to be some more talks on this, but it should go pretty smoothly in terms of waiving the patent. But this is like, you know, we're talking about more than just the European Union. We're talking about the individual countries in the European Union, and also other countries and other important kind of pharma-related countries. And one of those places, of course, is the United States. And President Biden has expressed that he will waive the patent. He's on board. Even though there's a lot of criticism of this patent thing from, you know, bad actors, people who want to leave the patent in place, like pharmaceutical companies who control already so much, far too much of our lives in many ways, but also power in different countries, power in terms of lobbying governments around the world. So the pharmaceutical companies were not happy, but Biden's firm on this. Biden's not like a progressive. He's not a progressive person. Biden of the Obama administration, you know, the administration that exiled Snowden, that continued with all kinds of war efforts and other things like this. That's Biden, right? But even Biden sees like the point of this. Ursula von der Leyen agrees. The European Union is on board. But there's one country that's really important and that's really powerful in the European Union that disagrees. And this is Germany. I have times when I defend Angela Merkel because she gets a lot of unfair criticism, but she also gets a lot of fair criticism. And this is Angela Merkel coming out at her worst. Angela Merkel, and hear me out because she actually makes a good point, but the overall like ethos of what she's trying to say is just evil and wrong and such a bad look, so bad. So basically, Merkel came out and speaking at a meeting at the European Commission. She has said, in terms of waiving the patent, she said no. She doesn't want to do it. It's a bad idea. The patent should stay in place, and she gave several reasons for it. We'll start with the good reasons. So she said that's not going to do a lot. It's just going to be a lot of talks and long negotiations again for everyone to get on board, and then it's not going to be effective because you still have to actually produce those vaccines and deliver them to the people who need it. So she said, you know, rather than do this like show, why don't we just actually like get together and produce more and make sure that everyone gets their fair share. And then she said, you know, what different countries need to do is simply send more out. They need to share what they have with the rest of the world, specifically talking about India. The European Union has been sharing a lot of its vaccines. I think far more than any other Western power. Correct me if I'm wrong, but certainly the United Kingdom isn't doing anything. And the European Union definitely has. They came very close to banning exports of vaccines a few months back when there was this crisis with AstraZeneca and they didn't get the amount of vaccines they had ordered. So there was this like big like crisis in the European Union over vaccinations. But, you know, countries like the post-Brexit United Kingdom have no qualms about keeping everything to themselves and not keeping it open. But the European Union didn't end up doing the ban. They're still sharing a part of what they have. None of it is enough, and none of it is going to help the current situation that is happening in places like India. But that's like the reasonable Angela Merkel. Now let's look at the unreasonable part of Angela Merkel. Then she went on to say that if you lift the patent, anyway, this is like her global idea, her ideology. If you lift the patent, it will take away the incentives for pharmaceutical companies to achieve the kinds of results that we need, and it will take the incentive away from making these vaccines. And then she went on to say that it was a mistake that the European Union did not accommodate Big Pharma more than they had, and they already accommodated a great deal, trust me. And that they allowed, those are her actual words, that they allowed India to take up too much of the pharmaceutical market. To be fair to Angela Merkel, I don't think she meant like we allowed as in like we control it. I think when she says allowed, she just means we allowed ourselves in the European Union to fall behind in the global market. I think that's what she means. But the painful side of this is that she says that if you lift the patent, it will take away the incentive from all these different people. That is just total neoliberal propaganda and also untrue. It's just not true. this ideology of neoliberalism that if you don't incentivize people with like big money, and if you don't incentivize these massive big corporations who are faceless and don't have motivation, they're not persons. Their only motivation is profit. But because they're these like they're profit machines, faceless, personless. They have nothing to do with empathy, nothing to do with humanity. So she's really talking about like if you don't accommodate these corporations, then the corporations will not want to work with you. But to like for her to say it doesn't incentivize people, that's total crap. If that were true, no art, no science, no discovery, no invention ever would have happened in this godforsaken world before capitalism. Surely. That's number one. And number two, there are systems outside of capitalism today, or outside of the kind of capitalism that we deal with in the West, that don't have these types of amazing incentives in healthcare, for example, where the healthcare is superior to what we have in the West, where we're paying a lot of money for it, and we're not really getting the kind of level of healthcare that other people are getting. Cuba is always one good example, and I'm not like a Cuban loving leftist. Like I don't worship Castro or anything like that. I have far more of a balanced view on Cuba, but one thing is for sure, like that healthcare system is one of the best in the world. And the incentive is not profit, and the incentive is not getting ahead, and the incentive is not like about winning at all costs. The incentive is just the art and science of medicine. Really. That's the incentive. You have places like Argentina, where the healthcare system, both private and public, which is incredibly accessible, is excellent. So, again, one of the highest levels in the world. The kind of capitalism that exists in Argentina is kind of nominal. It's a weird system. There's a lot of backdrops from Peronismo in the 20th century. A lot of kind of OG populism. A lot of broken capitalism that was kind of imposed on Argentina by draconian and aggressive shark loans given to it by the United States. It was kind of like one of those offers you couldn't refuse, and now everyone's suffering for it. And despite of all of this, and despite of the fact that that healthcare system doesn't incentivize people with profit, so if you become a surgeon or if you become a doctor, you're never really going to be the kind of rich that you would be in the United Kingdom or America. Nevertheless, the doctors are amazing. They're far superior to what just like the practice, the knowledge, the ability is a lot superior to what you will find in Europe, in America, in the United Kingdom. How is that possible, Angela Merkel? Like how? Like I cannot think of any reason why people would be good at their jobs other than horrible, like immediate, aggressive profit. There is something to the human spirit. There are people who are just educated in a different way, who have a different worldview, and maybe they do something because they truly love it. And the paradox of some places like Argentina is that when you take like the big, amazingly big profit, I'm not saying like every doctor is super poor in Argentina, that's not true either. They're like middle class professionals. But it's nothing compared to the kind of money-making scams that healthcare systems do in Euro-America, right? They're not incentivized by money in the same way, or status, or power, and yet they're better practitioners, they're better at their jobs somehow. There must be a different incentive in place, right? There must be some kind of a motivation here that is driving these people's ability and their professionalism. Could it possibly be, I mean, I'm just like saying that off the top of my head, but could it possibly be the fact that when you take the money out of medical care, that maybe then that takes away the bad incentives, and it allows people to focus on their actual jobs, and it allows to filter in the kind of people who care about patients, about people, about lives, and who want to help people and save lives. And they're not in it for the money, they're in it for the mission because they love it. I mean, that's just like this kooky left idea, but I guess it works in some places in the world. I don't know, maybe Europe's special. Merkel really, like, this is mask off. And I mean, like, she's always been like this, but it's just like this, like, she has this like machine-like, slightly phlegmatic, kind of slow paced, getting to that neoliberal goal kind of aura to her. And she's in this meeting about like waiving the patent, and there's people in India, like they're burning bodies on the streets. Like there's like rows of bodies burning on the streets. There's so many people dying. There's not enough space to like organize a funeral. And she's worried about like whether like we can incentivize Big Pharma. Like, how can we get Big Pharma to invest more in Germany and in Europe? This is all wrong. Like, the system is wrong. It's an ideology. It's a propaganda. This is not how you incentivize people. This is not how it works. And this is not like a leftist dream. It's not like a fantasy of like a better world that could be, but it's not like doable, because it's being done in all these different countries right now. Countries that Western powers, Western imperialist powers, have screwed time and time again to try and take away their ability to make themselves independent of them, to make themselves thrive, to allow them to self-govern. And yet, despite of all this difficulty, all the coups and the military regimes of the 20th century, countries like Argentina still managed to thrive in areas that are basic human right areas. In areas that we should not have to fight for, in places like Europe, in places where we shouldn't have to like have these discussions. Big Pharma is so corrupt from top to bottom on so many different levels, from the types of drugs they manufacture, to the types of testing they do and how bad the testing is, how corrupt different systems like the FDA are around the world when they approve these drugs. A lot of these drugs are used and abused on a variety of different client groups and patients, including underage kids. The constant pushing of drugs, and I'm not like an anti-drug person, like for everyone, but I think there's certain types of pharmaceuticals that are just constantly pushed just because they've been produced and they have to do something with them. And there's like case after case after case of lawsuits against people like AstraZeneca for pushing the wrong drugs on people, for pushing depression drugs on people who don't need them, for not doing their testing properly so that nobody really knows how the drugs work. A lot of psychoactive drugs are pushed on the general population with dire consequences. A lot of other types of drugs too. And I'm someone I take drugs every day. They're like life-preserving drugs in a sense. I wouldn't be able to have any kind of a quality of life without the drugs that I take. I need them. So I'm very appreciative of the kinds of advances that science and medicine can make. That does not detract from the fact that the practices of these big pharma companies are dirty practices. They exploit people, again, they exploit people in different countries. They exploit subsidies they get from big Western powers, not to mention the tax cuts, the tax breaks, and all the other practices that come into this. The lobbying practices in medicine, in Medicare, the way that pharmaceutical companies routinely bribe and get on board doctors in the private and public sector to push their drugs, the way they market their drugs. All of those things, the pricing, everything, it's just corruption after corruption upon corruption. These companies have too much power, and they do not have our best interests at heart, and they're not driven. And this is the whole point that Angela is making. Like, well, they need to like be making these millions, because if they don't make these millions, then they won't innovate. No, actually, it's kind of the opposite. They don't innovate because they make millions, because their incentive is profit. And if the incentive is profit, they focus on things that are a quick buck. They focus on things that are easy to test and hard to falsify. Like, for example, psychoactive drugs. A lot of like the psychological medical industry, the biopsychological industry, is prefaced on a lot of really bad research. There's so little we know about the human brain, really. A lot of it is conjecture. But if you build up enough hype, you can sell a lot of things. And why is that? Because a lot of people in our world today are unhappy, lonely, and they feel dejected and left behind. And instead of actually pushing for social change, instead of giving people the space to talk and change the world, we tell them that there's something wrong with them and that they need a pill that then they pay for. And so the cycle continues. This is just one example of the ways that pharma abuses things. But there's other things. There's certain conditions that big pharma has the money to test drugs for, but they don't test the drugs for these conditions because they don't think in their a cost-profit analysis, they don't deem those drugs to be valuable enough. So a lot of people have a lower quality of life. One example, I can give you an example from my life. I'm celiac. There's no drugs, there's no big pharma incentive to help celiacs. Celiacs have an intolerance to gluten, so they can't eat wheat, and it's it can get really serious over time. But because there's already a cure, there's a cure for this disease, you just don't eat you don't eat the wheat, right? So there's no incentive for big pharma to develop any kind of drugs or better testing for this disease, which affects a lot of people, and it goes undiagnosed a lot for a very long period of time. But they're not incentivized to do these tests because it's a small amount of the population, and it's not going to bring a lot of profit because a lot of these people like me, we have a choice. I could take a pill if they had a pill, or I could just have a diet that suited my needs as a person with this condition. So they don't invest in it. And I'm not particularly bitter about it. I'd rather not take the pill. But it's just one example of the way that a profit-motivated machine like Big Pharma is never going to give us the kind of innovation and the kind of forward creative thinking that we need in the biomedical industries today, especially with the kind of knowledge we have, with the kind of testing, the increased understanding of genes, of heritage, of the different types of factors that go into predicting what kinds of conditions some people might have. We have all this. We can do 23andMe, but we can't develop very basic drugs for some chronic diseases. No, that's not true. We just develop the types of drugs that we can make a lot of money from, and we can do that over a long period of time, and we can market it to a large population. For example, Big Pharma that works in psychology, where it's a large population. A lot of people are unhappy. We can sell them a lot of drugs and make them feel better, or not. Sometimes not. Sometimes maybe we can make them just addicted. And that's just as good, because it's all about the profit. It's not about the people. But if you took the money away from Big Pharma, then the incentive would be the well-being of people and innovation and the improvement of the human condition. But no, Angela Merkel begs to differ. She wants more. She wants more Big Pharma. She wants more breaks for Big Pharma. And she wants to give more power to Big Pharma in Germany and beyond in the European Union. What a letdown. People like Pasteur, with penicillin, he wasn't, this is not an apparatchik working in some corporation and he was motivated because his boss had goals for that quarter. That's not what motivated Pasteur, and that's not how science and innovation happens at all. But we're sucking, we have for the last 20 years sucked all the innovation and all of the creativity and all the air out of the arts and sciences. And it's insulting to say that no one would do anything. No one would ever have one single interesting and new thought if we didn't have these financial incentives, and only those, and only through the corporate system. Appalling. And that was the show. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it so much. Wherever you are, whoever you are, I appreciate your time. And until I see you again, take care of yourself and stay safe out there.